Welcome, my name is Alex Ayon, and I'm going to be talking about a project I recently started. And this talk is called Trial and Error because this project had a lot of trial and error in it. How do I got started on this project? Well, I was in the Techlahoma Slack channel and I saw that someone needed help scraping the OSCN website for protective orders. To me, that project seemed interesting and challenging, so I decided to see if I could get that project for myself. I didn't actually get the project, but I decided to do it anyway because I thought it'd be a great learning opportunity. And some advice to some new developers: your time is invaluable. Charge as much as you can for it. Be respectful, be courteous, but do not sell yourself short. So another piece of advice I would give to new developers is to learn a little bit about the project that you're going to start. So learn about what a protective order is, if that's what you're doing. But at the very onset, a protective order is a court mandate against a defendant to seize all contact, refrain from certain actions, and comply with certain provisions. So you can start seeing there'll be a defendant, there'll be a plaintiff, there'll be judges. This is court-related stuff. So what is the OSCN? It stands for Oklahoma State Courts Network. It's a website that holds public information about all the state's courts. There you can view court records for marriage licenses, divorces, traffic violations, protective orders, amongst other things. I've included here a protective order URL, so on your own time, if you want to go visit that webpage and see what that looks like to get a better idea of what I'm talking about, that'd be great. So breaking it down, how do you start a brand new project? Well, I think at the very core, every project starts with data. First, you have to have data in order to do something with it. So how do you get that data? Well, the data sometimes sits on a server on the internet somewhere. We don't know where that server is, and it doesn't really matter. All you have to be able to do is be able to query that server to get that data back. That data can come in various formats, like JSON, HTML, CSV, and TXT. Of the ones I mentioned, I think CSV is probably one of the easiest to work with. It's not nested, or it shouldn't be nested like JSON, but it can be. So this is a Python talk, so I use a Python library called requests to make these requests out to the internet and get this data. At the very minimum, request takes a basic URL of the web page you're trying to get. So in this question, I'm asking, do you like soup? And I know I do, and I definitely like broccoli cheddar soup. But I think the reason why I wanted to ask you if you like soup is because Python has a module called Beautiful Soup. And what it does is it allows you to pull data from HTML markup. And I think they call the module Beautiful Soup because when you start looking at an HTML file, it starts looking out like alphabet soup. There's just strings, characters everywhere. But Beautiful Soup claims to save you hours of work. It helps you searching, navigating, and modifying the parse tree. And it has a find all method, which is used extensively to find all the tags with specific attributes. A parse tree looks somewhat like this image, where all HTML pages will look somewhat like this. The document is the root, and then you have tags attached to that root, and so on, so you'll have parent and child relationships. A Beautiful Soup helps you parse this tree. So into the regularity. What I found was that protective orders varied in their structure depending on whether there was attorneys involved, how many dockets there were, how many events, how many issues. So if you navigate to that URL I talked about previously, you'll see some of this. If there were attorneys present, the markup would look in a certain way, and if there wasn't, it would look different. So what I had to do was sample quite a few protective orders to get an idea of what the data would look like, to get an idea of all the combinations, all the different things I could possibly see in a protective order. If you would like to look at these yourself, you're welcome to navigate to Protective Order 2015-1 and 2015-2. One of them has attorneys, the other one does not. And what I also found was that some protective orders were eliminated from the record. So what you'll have is a protective order number, but with no data attached. That's something I didn't think would happen, but it did. So watch out for those gotchas. I also use regular expressions to scrape some of that data. What regular expressions allow you to do is to match a string that could be found within a larger string. It makes it easier to match things that are fairly common, like names, addresses, dates, and other important information. I've included a link to this webpage because it includes a very easy-to-use visual interface where you can test whether your regular expression will work with the strings that you want to match. So models. Let's talk a little bit about models. You got to model the data that's coming in from the web page. So models capture properties of objects. Objects could be anything, basically a person, place, thing, activity that you want to define. So as an example of something that you could model would be a vehicle. A vehicle can have wheels, it can have an engine, it can have a fuel type, and these things, these properties can vary between vehicles. Models also have relationships between them. So a vehicle could have one manufacturer, but a manufacturer can make multiple vehicles. And at least for SQL, the relationship can be one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. So some potential pitfalls. If you're working with SQLite 3 database, which a lot of people are when they're starting to prototype a Django project, don't open that database with a text editor. It will corrupt that database, and you'll have to start from scratch. Instead, use a database browser for SQLite. It is free and I believe open source. There you can view and explore your data safely. You can also execute SQL queries in the database browser for SQLite if you want, and it exposes some of the decisions that Django made for you, the ORM, Django's ORM, Object Relational Mapper. So let me show you what that database browser looks like so you can get a better idea of what it can do. So this is what it looks like. If you go to the database structure, it will show all the tables that were created when you executed your make migrations command in Django. Some of these tables I created by defining a model. Some of these were created for me by Django, which is sometimes surprises people, but Django will add extra tables to your database. You can browse your database to see some of the fields in here, and that actually ties in with an API I'm going to talk about later. So back to my presentation. So creating your own API, you can use the Django Rest Framework. I think it's a great API for creating, well, it's a great framework for creating your own APIs. And it already uses your Django models, so you don't have to repeat a lot of the code that you would have to with something else. It also automatically detects content type. So where am I going to take this project next? Well, I'm going to update my models to enforce uniqueness. So what I noticed was that there are quite a few duplicate records in my database. So I'm going to enforce uniqueness. I'm going to update some relationships. I'm going to remove some many-to-many relationships and use the foreign key instead. And then go to my admin and use tabular inlines so I can see all these references to my model. I'm going to create more API paths for different models. I'm going to secure that API path using the authenticated user that Django provides for you. I'm going to clean up some of this data and come up with better regular expressions. Names are really hard to match, especially Irish names apparently. They have apostrophes, they have various characters you wouldn't expect in a name, so you have to watch out for that. Addresses are very hard as well. They suffer from pretty similar problems. They also contain numbers also on top of various extraneous characters. I want to implement a user-facing form so that a user that I allow into the database can modify the models and maybe add new models into the database. And I also want to implement this model using different databases, whether it be Postgres, MySQL, or MongoDB. So I've included here in this slide some references that I used to come up with this project, like to put it all together. And that's my talk. If you have any questions, feel free to reach me on Techlahoma Slack or on Twitter. Here's my contact information. And if you're interested in this project, please clone the repository or fork it. Stick a fork in it. Thank you.